You vote in your local elections, you vote in your national elections. You might not vote at all. Either way, you probably think you understand what democracy is and how it works, and that this is how it looks, because that's what you've been shown your entire life. But here's the truth. You haven't been given the whole picture. Democracy is something that we've been told we just have, but it's something we have to fight for. You don't realise it, but there's a battle always being fought for our democracy. Only we haven't been on the field for the last 50 years. I've studied how people around the world have been taking power back into their own hands through entirely different democratic structures. In this video, I'm going to show you why your understanding of democracy is holding you back. By the end, you won't just see the limits of the system you live under, you'll be able to imagine something much bigger.
We are going to drain the swamp.
It is undermining American democracy.
Trump has said, he called me. He said, Tim Cook used to call me throughout my last presidency. Of course, there's Elon Musk. Sam Altman also in that room. Obviously a close relationship to the point where he may have some real power here. Jeff Bezos also in that room, of course. Kind of make this pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. Almost every single tech CEO in this room has done exactly that.
See, democracy is only as strong as the education that surrounds it. We finish school understanding how a leaf turns the sun into energy, but we don't understand what democracy actually is. As a result, we learn this through doing. In our case, doing just means going to the ballot box every now and then, or maybe not even at all. We rely on our parents for our political views and involvement when we're young, and then we rely on YouTube and idiots like me once we're older. Whether or not someone decides to explore democracy as an idea, it's pure chance. But why does it matter if we understand what it is? It happens regardless of our participation, right? And it happens regardless of our understanding. Because if you understand how it works, you're able to manipulate it in your interests. Just like some people are doing right now.
His name is Christopher Harben, here on the left.
Palantir, the way it's wormed its way into government contracts,
was rubber stamped by Conservative Party leaders in return for favorable press coverage.
People like lobby groups, donors, politicians, multinational corporations, arms firms, billionaires, multimillionaires, CEOs and media moguls. They all know how democracy works. They've taken the time to understand it, get embedded within it, and as a result, it works for them, not for you. Because of this, they've been able to shape it and contort it to make sure it fits their worldview and their interests. They've corrupted it because there isn't an opposing force pushing back against it. But what force are these people exerting over democracy, and what direction is it taking it in? Why is it important? What exactly does this look like? By what mechanisms are they pushing democracy in a direction that serves them? It looks like this.
People can give unlimited amounts of money. We've seen donors given contracts, seats in the House of Lords. We have a political system in that sense in which money buys access.
They're giving you the money because they think you are going to further their particular interests in the world.
You're in a world where political power is not as great as financial power.
And we shouldn't be talking
maybe
about
it was, maybe it was always thus.
It was always thus, but it's even more striking now.
In the UK, major parties have taken millions from wealthy donors and hedge funds, particularly around election cycles. Look at this example of someone posing as a donor to get access to the current Labour government. Link in the description. Enron was successful in 49 instances of lobbying between the late 80s to 2001, including wins like the Energy Policy Act in 1992 and subsequent Federal Energy Regulatory Commission rules, opened electricity grids and forced utilities to unbundle services, enabling competition that Enron dominated. The Securities and Exchange Commission granted exemptions, letting Enron invest in risky ventures and high debt. State-level lobbying secured tax cuts and deregulation in their interests. Fossil fuel firms like ExxonMobil are able to lobby against the concept of climate change. Not even climate change itself, the very idea of it, its very existence. Studies show hundreds of millions of dollars to groups like the Heartland Institute, with total lobbying and PR spending running at the tens of billions, comparable to the GDP of a small bloody country. And it works in their interests. You've got Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post, Elon Musk buys Twitter. These are individuals with disproportionate influence over information flows. Media ownership concentration consistently provides agenda-setting power. If your political ideas could be spread amongst tens of millions of people every single day, how much influence would that give you? The Sackler family, through Purdue Pharma, aggressively marketed opioids while downplaying their addiction risks. If you've ever watched Dope Sick, that's those guys. Despite their central role in the crisis, settlements avoided full admissions of guilt and protected the family from lawsuits. This is because of their ability to lobby, donate, and influence regulation. There are tons of examples of this. Media empires like the Murdochs openly back political candidates and shape electoral narratives in the UK, the US and Australia. This one's almost a cliche at this point, but it continues to happen, and no one's taking it seriously.
October 94, cash for questions. Tim Smith fell on his sword.
Police have been conducting a lengthy investigation into whether wealthy businessmen were offered peerages in return for donations to the Labour Party.
The Conservative Party's chief fundraiser resigning after he was secretly filmed offering access to the Prime Minister.
Allegations about lobbying, what he might have said about lockdowns, and most problematically now, who paid for his number 11 flat to be done up.
Serving and former members of the Honours Committees have told us how they came under pressure from successive Conservative governments to honour Tory supporters or donors.
Change was meant to mean leaving the scandal of the Tory years behind, but awkward questions about freebies and donors have followed Labour to Liverpool.
So what exactly do you think your single vote can do against all this? On its own, very little. See, democracy isn't failing because your vote's meaningless. It fails because we aren't active in it. One side treats politics as a system to be studied, influenced and engineered, whether deliberately or accidentally. They're in the room, they're in with the decision makers, and they can influence major outcomes without anybody casting a single vote or even needing to tell anybody it's happening. And you're told it begins and ends with your cross on a ballot paper. Now this has given us the weakest, most shallow version of democracy that's available. Without the push and pull of different groups wanting to be represented, we end up with this terrible half-assed version. You see, these people, the CEOs, the billionaires, the MNCs, the fossil fuel companies, the lobbyists, they're pulling democracy towards themselves and away from you. In order for us to start being an opposing force and pull democracy more towards us, we need to understand what democracy actually is and how it's changed over time and what it looks like today. Let's explore what democracy is. Let's take a whistle-stop tour through the timeline of democracy. We start in Athens with direct participation. Only for a narrow group of people. Still, back then, people like Plato and Aristotle were sceptical of democracy, arguing rule by the masses could become unstable or irrational. We then have a quiet period for democracy as we go through the Roman Empire and feudalism and the medieval era. It re-emerges much later in early modern philosophy. People like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, who we talked about last time, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. They shift the idea towards individual rights and government by consent, rather than direct rule like it was back in Plato's day. This thinking leads into the late 18th century revolutions, especially in America, during the American and French Revolution, where democracy becomes tied to representation. No taxation without representation, that popular phrase. It's still largely limited to property-owning elites at this point though. It's only really after the shocks of World War I and World War II that we get universal suffrage starting to appear. It becomes widespread. This runs alongside the rise of social democracy, which is mass participation combined with redistribution. This model starts to get reworked in the late 20th century with, you guessed it, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. Markets are now prioritised and democratic control over the economy is reduced. If you want to learn more about this, check out this video. We're now at the tail end of this last part. Only since Thatcher and Reagan, political parties rooted in labour movements, trade unions, things like that, they were ripped out by Thatcher and Reagan and slowly deteriorated over time, and our trust in those things diminished with it. And once they were gone, capital accumulation had a free run at democracy and has largely shaped it into what it is today. $1 is now worth way more than your vote. One man, one vote. One billionaire, 1 billion votes.
The basic idea was that we could never win an election on getting certain things because we were in such a small minority. But maybe you could actually unilaterally change the world without having to constantly convince people and beg people and plead with people who are never going to agree with you through a technological means. And this is where I think technology is this incredible alternative to politics.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Thanks so much for watching so far. Really hope you're enjoying it. I'd love to do this full time, and there's a few ways that you can help me. One, you could always buy me a coffee. And thanks to everybody that has so far that's allowed me to get this better microphone, because that last one was cheap and it sucked. So thanks so much for everybody that's helped out with that. Really, really appreciate it. Secondly, you can hit like, hit subscribe, and most importantly, share it. The more people my content reaches, the faster I'll be able to grow. The faster, hopefully, I'll be able to do this full time, which means more reading, more learning, more digesting, more writing, more videos, and more content overall. So hope you're enjoying it, and I'll let you get back to the video. What does this actually look like though? How does democracy shake out in a tangible, real way, rather than just in books and in theory? What are the institutions and the mechanisms by which democracy becomes a real active thing? And how can abstractions like lobbying, wealth concentration, and media monopoly become real, tangible influences on our systems? To do this, let's look at the two clearest examples of the push-pull forces that we have that exist today.
A stately London bridge overlooks an unusually tranquil Thames River. But the tranquility is ironic, since empty piers and idle ships mean labor trouble. The 65,000-member National Union of Seamen strikes for higher wages and a shorter work week. The strike is serious and could cripple the British economy, so dependent on imports and exports. Some 600 ships, including the giant Queen Elizabeth, are affected by the walkout, and a state of national emergency is proclaimed by Prime Minister Wilson. Car ferry terminals are closed at a time when tourist traffic is unusually heavy. Britain in a state of virtual blockade, while labor talks between the seamen and the ship owners continue.
Following the end of World War II, democracy in its various forms spread across the West, and eventually across the rest of the world as their old empires started to decolonise. This didn't happen accidentally. This happened because there were forces pushing for it to happen, combined with the material conditions that allowed them to do that. After the end of World War II, Europe was in ruins. It had been obliterated during 2 world wars, and its productive capacity had been mostly turned towards the war effort for nearly a decade. This meant that capital had been literally destroyed, and the old elites had been fractured and they'd lost a lot of their power. States came out of the war with much more direct control over their own means of production. The looming threat of the USSR was ever present, and it created an alternative system which gave organised labour more leverage for the West to create conditions for its people that would turn it away from communism as an idea. We also saw huge strides in useful technologies that improved our standards of living. Some of them resulted in technological gains during the 2 world wars. Governments were pushed to spend big on social welfare, safety nets, improve standards of living, reduce poverty and job creation. The private sector was innovating technologies we actually needed, and this was coupled with mass consumption, rising wages and huge increases in productivity. The rebuilding of Europe created work for decades, and as the West oversaw its longest sustained period of growth, this created economic dependencies that reduced the risk of conflict. Only in Europe though. The rest of the world didn't see that. We saw our standard of living increase significantly. The world you live in today was built during this window. This coalesced into what we refer to as the golden age of capitalism. But more importantly, this is also a golden age for redistribution. I'm not being nostalgic. These conditions are important for what it meant for workers. Workers had significantly more power than they do now. People returning from war, or people who've been heavily involved in the industrial and agricultural home front, wanted to see their standards of living rise. They wanted good wages, good public infrastructure, and they wanted safety nets in case the work dried up. They achieved this through movement-driven political parties, such as Labour, who back then were a very different party. They were built by workers from the ground up, and they were pushed by popular movements and grassroots campaigns that resulted in the creation of the NHS. Could you imagine that now? Somebody proposing something like that and building it from the ground up and actually getting it done. Insane. They had strong workers' unions, collective bargaining power, and were in a position where the capitalists were being constrained by these forces that we currently don't have. This is the push against capital's pull. Trade union membership was 55% of all workers in the country by 1970. Now imagine that now, 55%. That's a powerful movement, that's a lot of people. This is huge. They had bargaining power against their employers, and through collective action and strikes, they pushed them for things like higher real wages, the establishment of the 40-hour work week, stronger workplace safety standards, redundancy protection, sick pay, increased holidays, expansion of occupational pensions, and in politics, grassroots movements achieved things like the expansion of council housing, the welfare state, which meant unemployment benefits, state pensions, disability support, free secondary education. Education didn't used to be free. Large-scale public investment in infrastructure, public services, and nationalised industries. This is democracy in action. This is popular governance. This is elites responding to the needs of its people through pressure. They didn't do it out of the kindness of their hearts. They were pushed into it. Almost everything in your life that you rely on today, that you probably take for granted, was created by workers. Not by elites, not by capitalists, not by the rich, but by workers who were living through those conditions, who were able to push on these institutions and democracy to get what they needed. And importantly, we also, as I said earlier, had a really high top rate of tax. 80-90% in some cases. At this time, corporate power is fractured. You don't have all the big monopolies you have now. Wealth is not as concentrated. This limits the influence of private business and private actors on politics. This is democracy working for its people, because its people have mechanisms by which they can get involved. They're involved in multiple spheres of their life, and importantly, they're involved at work. Voter turnout's higher, and we're able to exert pressure on institutions to work for us. We aren't just writing letters to our MPs or getting out on the streets with signs. We had someone in the room speaking on our behalf. Someone like us who came from the world we came from, speaking for us. Fast forward a little bit to 1980. All this starts to change.
I know full well the responsibilities that await me as I enter the door of number 10. And I'll strive unceasingly to try to fulfill the trust and confidence that the British people have placed in me and the things in which I believe.
Idle industries have cast workers into unemployment, human misery, and personal indignity. We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow. And let there be no misunderstanding. We are going to begin to act, beginning today.
And we're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state than when we came here 11.5 years ago.
Let me take you on a journey back to Tbilisi in Georgia, 10 years prior, where I was just a young whippersnapper in a white vest doing a thing called the Mongol Rally. I've written about this on my Substack. I'll paraphrase some of that here. You can read more about that there. Links in the description. I'm fresh off the back of my master's degree, and I'm keen to exercise some of my new understanding. Given where we are in the world, we're in Tbilisi in Georgia. Beautiful place, you should visit. We'd driven through a lot of Eastern Europe, and we'd gone to some kind of off the beaten path towns full of old Soviet busts, right? You've got Stalin, Lenin, Marx, all these guys. Busts everywhere. Old Soviet dudes with big moustaches. And you get that vibe, right? You feel like you're driving through ex-Soviet places sometimes, especially the more rural parts of Eastern Europe. So we're a few vodkas in and we get into it about democracy. And I get into it with this other British guy who's on a different team. Let's call him Steve. He believed that we lived in a stable, healthy democracy in the UK, right? He was reflecting on the old system that used to have influence where we were in the world, right? The USSR, the Soviet system. His view, I believe, represents the popular view of democracy in the West. I pushed him on this and we finally got into it, and you can basically summarise his view as this, right? So these are the reasons why he believed we live in a stable democracy. Free and fair elections with real choice, right? Elections are run honestly, results are respected, and people can choose between genuinely different political options, right? The Green Party on the left and the Reform on the right, right? Complete polar opposite parties. You have basic rights and freedoms. People can speak, organise, protest, worship, and they can live their lives without fear of the state. Open government that can be challenged, right? Those in power have to explain what they do. They have to explain how their money gets spent, and they can be questioned or removed if they misuse it, right? In theory. Laws apply to everyone all the time. Rules are enforced consistently. Leaders are not above the law, and institutions continue to function beyond any one government, right? And we have a free press and we have open public debate. Media can investigate and criticise power, and people can access different viewpoints without censorship. And look at what I'm doing here. Now, like I said, I think this represents probably the popular view of democracy. And all these things shouldn't be taken for granted, right? Absolutely, all these things are super important. I love the fact that I can sit here doing this in my spare time. But I can openly criticise our government online. I can put a video out openly criticising Keir Starmer, and I won't get arrested for that. And I think that shouldn't be taken for granted, and that's really important. But democracy is more than just these liberal values. Democracy is participation, right? Yes, we have these liberal values. We have our freedom. We have our individualism. We can pursue what we want. But it shouldn't stop there, and we also shouldn't want it to stop there. So I'm going to go through all these again, just like I did to Steve in Tbilisi when I were a couple of vodkas deep. Granted, back then it probably didn't come out very well. But I'm going to take each one of these points in turn, right? Show you why they're not as powerful as they could be. I'm not saying they're weak. I really want to reiterate that. I really appreciate the freedoms that I have available to me. However, it could be so much more, right? And I think we should be more ambitious in what we demand for ourselves.
It has been the considered view of conference, by a very narrow vote, that we should return on Tuesday and continue the fight as far as this union is concerned.
If anyone's won, it's been the miners who stayed at work, the dockers who stayed at work, the power workers who stayed at work, the lorry drivers who stayed at work, the railwaymen who stayed at work, the managers who stayed at work. In other words, all of those people who kept the wheels of Britain turning.
The miners, united, will never be defeated. The miners, united, will never be defeated. The miners, united, will never be defeated. The miners, united, will never be defeated.
Whoa! Thanks so much for watching so far. Really hope you're enjoying it. I'd love to do this full time, and there's a few ways that you can help me. One, you could always buy me a coffee. And thanks to everybody that has so far that's allowed me to get this better microphone, because that last one was cheap and it sucked. So thanks so much for everybody that's helped out with that. Really, really appreciate it. Secondly, you can hit like, hit subscribe, and most importantly, share it. The more people my content reaches, the faster I'll be able to grow. The faster, hopefully, I'll be able to do this full time, which means more reading, more learning, more digesting, more writing, more videos, and more content overall. So hope you're enjoying it, and I'll let you get back to the video. Okay, free and fair elections, real choice. Yes, we have regular elections, we have referendums. Firstly, our first past the post system does not reward active participation from its citizens. A system in which you can win the popular vote but not win power, that's actively disenfranchising people that vote for it. And it undermines itself. The fact that we have tactical voting, the fact that you vote for one party to keep another party out, it actively weakens your vote and it weakens your ability to actually say what you want. Stick to your own values. People should be able to do that. It forces politics into this strategic game and usually forces it into a two-horse race. The other thing it does is it forces centrism. Because you're trying to win a broad coalition of people across a small number of areas, you tend to have to focus on the centrality of all that. You tend to not get extremes in first past the post. Secondly, our elections and our referendums are heavily influenced by big money private actors, more and more as time goes on. During the Brexit referendum, if you had the money and the means, you could contribute heavily to swaying opinion either way by paying for TV time, paying for mouthpieces, talking heads, paying for ad space, or more importantly, flooding social media with opinions, bots, whatever it may be. And now this isn't just that Brexit did that, Remain did that too. It becomes a battle of budgets, not a battle of ideas. Transparency International apportion almost a one-to-one relationship between pounds spent and votes accrued during the referendum. Vote Leave received £17.5 million of all donations, almost exactly one vote for every pound given towards the Brexit campaign, compared to Remain's £14.2 million. Who's really in control of the outcome of that referendum? You? Or is it £32 million? Okay, basic rights and freedoms. As I said, I'm able to sit here doing this. So we do largely have freedom of speech in the broad sense. I don't need to worry about being arrested for what I say. But because opinions are tied to profits, my freedom of speech is limited by what's profitable. You can build a career from having opinions. And right-wing punditry is big business. The more money you have, the freer your speech. GB News has recently come under fire because it's not being investigated properly by Ofcom. It's basically become the mouthpiece of Reform UK. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. A political party shouldn't be able to just buy its own TV network. There's freedom of speech and then there's concentration of opinions. They're two different things. This then has a compounding effect of bringing in money for individuals who are part of its ecosystem. There's a weird media pipeline of people who get cancelled and then end up falling down a right-wing path towards money. No one's buying their books anymore, so they just jump on right-wing punditry in America or in the UK and they get paid big sums of money for that. Nigel Farage has received the equivalent of £1.2 million a year from GB News. The leader of a major political party should not be receiving £1.2 million a year to convince the population of their stance. It's crazy behaviour. You think about what that does to undermine his opinion, right? Is he there to tell you what he believes because he believes it? Or is he there to tell you what he believes because he's getting paid to? It really muddies the water between a person's values and what they say. And yes, we can protest. Look at the success and failure of things like Just Stop Oil, or the recent No Kings protest, which I know has had a lot of opinions about it. The success and the failure of these is decided by sympathetic or hostile media coverage and by the involvement of key political parties. You can protest, but how that's perceived depends on how aligned with establishment goals it is and how pro-big money it is. So, open government that can be challenged. Politics in the UK is incredibly top-down. The story of Morgan McSweeney shows you just how easy it is to get your hands on a political machine and turn it to your will, against the electorate's wishes. Jeremy Corbyn, regardless of what you think of him, got nearly 13 million votes. This one guy, though, decided he's ideologically opposed to Corbynism, so he hijacked an entire political party to make sure his politics never see the light of day. Nobody voted for Morgan McSweeney. Nobody even knew Morgan McSweeney was doing this for a long time. and he undermined a huge, grassroots-led political movement. Realistically, the best way to influence the outcomes of a sitting government is through lobbying. There's multi-billion-dollar lobbying industries for weapons, warmongering, resource extraction and deregulation. If you have the money, you can get in the room and you have a much louder voice. Laws apply to everyone, all the time. Only one banker went to jail for collapsing the entire global economy and ruining the lives of millions of people. That's not rules apply to everyone all the time. Similarly, during COVID, the very people setting the laws were found to be routinely breaking them with little to no consequence. We also have lots of public institutions designed to curb power and to work in the interests of the people. Courts, ombudsmen and regulators are set up to curb exactly the kind of private power that we've seen infiltrating our democracy. Our water companies give you a good insight into how these institutions truly operate, how they're easily infiltrated through revolving door hiring practices, and how they can be controlled if you have enough money. We have senior leaders of water companies joining the very institutions designed to curb them. We have fines levied against them that pale in comparison to payouts for water company shareholders. They've had $57 billion in dividends paid out of shareholders since 1991, while the fines levied against them sit in the measly hundreds of millions. While our waterways are polluted, our bills go up, and our infrastructure crumbles. My water bill's £60 a month. Free press. That's the big one. Of the major national newspaper titles and top news brands, in the UK, News UK, Daily Mail and Reach control roughly 90% of media circulation and a large share of online news spaces, meaning just a handful of owners ultimately decide what gets printed in the online news agenda. Now, I know you're going to say, well, Rupert Murdoch isn't editing these papers. No. But they have a vested interest in making sure that these papers lean a certain way. Just look at the succession battle between James Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch. See what I mean? James was actively pushed out of that battle because he wanted to take the paper in a different direction. The top-down approach of these organisations means that the opinions of the person at the top work their way down. In the United States, while digital news traffic is more spread out, still a small cohort of large media conglomerates and investment groups own the majority of major old-school newspapers, broadcast stations and news outlets, including corporate parents of the New York Times, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal and major television networks. And most of the media in the US is owned by a small handful of owners. According to media reform, 7 of the top 15 online platforms used to access news in the UK are controlled by Meta, Google and Xcorp. Google commands 93% of UK search engine use, while Meta and Google together account for 3/5 of all UK advertising spend, giving these two big tech companies unrivaled control over how news is found, accessed and funded online. Its opinions are widely for sale by anyone that can afford sustained access and wants to preserve the status quo. Despite what seems to go around online, the media landscape is incredibly right-leaning. There's a vast array of media that support right-wing politics, such as the Daily Mail, The Sun, The Telegraph, GB News, Fox News, talk radio networks, a small number that support liberal politics, such as The Guardian, The New York Times and MSNBC, but truly left-wing media is incredibly limited. For example, Novara Media, Jacobin, Tribune or Democracy Now!, largely because there's no large pools of private capital for corporate advertisers willing to subsidise media that challenges property relations, wealth concentration or investor power. Why would you invest in a paper that's talking about worker capitalist relations? You're just not good, are you? You're effectively paying for your own demise. Media is famously not reliably profit generating at scale. It's often sustained through philanthropy, cross-subsidy, or investment whose return is indirect. GB News is losing money hand over fist, but they continue all the same. Their return isn't generated through the media outlet itself, but through influencing public opinion in ways that ensure profits are protected and expanded elsewhere. And the barriers to investment regulation and wealth consolidation are resisted. The message here is pretty simple. Public opinion can be bought. For me, that doesn't constitute a free press. In the workplace, we used to have representation. We used to have a third party that could step in between the worker and the boss. And it's the most direct version of worker and capital coming together and battling it out that you can get in your direct life. But do you get a say in any of that? No. And there's so many forces pushing on that, but none pushing back. Strikes are long gone. Trade unions are toothless. And I'm not saying we have to return to that way of living. But you have to understand the areas of your life where you should have a say, but you don't. And think about that when you're going through the world. Think about what avenues you actually have to influence things, unless you're a multimillionaire. Everything that you see in your life that you find annoying, think about, if I really wanted to change this, how could I do it? What avenues are available to me easily and accessible through institutions that already exist? Just think about that as you go through life. And most importantly, what we need to do is we need to understand that we need way more of a say in what happens in our economy, in our politics, and in our country and in our communities. At the minute, it's being run roughshod by a bunch of capitalists. They're in the room, they're sitting down with the prime ministers, they're sitting down with your councillors, they're sitting down with the presidents. They're paying lobby groups tens of millions of dollars to write legislation. They're funding studies that support what they want, and they're controlling the media narrative. So if you want to take power back, you have to organise locally and collectively. You have to stand with your fellow workers. Think about this in every area of your life, but particularly think about it at work, because that's the clearest example. Now, there are political parties who are trying to do this. On the left in particular, there's the Green Party, and there's the New Your Party, who are trying to build bottom-up movements, right? Because politics is so top-down. They're trying to build a democratic base where it's one member, one vote, and everybody gets to say over policy. Now, you're probably thinking, wow, what a mess, right? Yeah, probably is a mess. But that's the trade-off, right? The trade-off is, if you want control democratically over what happens in your life, it will be difficult. It's not going to be easy, at least in the short term. It'll be difficult. Everybody will have to compromise a little bit. It'll be a bit messy and it might not work out. But would you rather stand with your fellow workers and decide where to go next, even if that's not necessarily the right direction? Or would you rather let a bunch of undemocratically elected multimillionaires and billionaires, the sorts of people who don't even think introspectively and do not even value human life on this planet, do you really want them driving us off the edge of a cliff? Think about that. Throughout history, there's been great examples of workers taking back control. One really good example is the Lucas Plan. There are also ways that people can get involved in their community, in their budgeting, and decide where and how that money gets spent, such as participatory budgeting in places like Brazil. Now, if you like this video, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to make another one exploring those 3 ideas in greater detail. I wanted to put it in this video, but I don't think I'd be able to do it all justice. It'd be like a huge video. So I'd love to do a follow-up talking about other ways of organising that exist in the world or have existed in the world to show you what's possible, because right now it feels like there's so much work to do, right? But it is possible. There are other ways of organising, and we can come together collectively. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. I'd love to put that one together. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thanks again everybody that helped me out with this new microphone. I hope you prefer the audio quality now. I'd love to do this full time. So hit like, hit subscribe, share this with your friends. The more people that see this content, the quicker I can grow, and hopefully the more time I can devote to this, because I don't have to work a job at the same time. It means I can read more, I can learn more, I can digest more, I can write more, and I can record more. I can put out way more content, and I can have a bit more fun with it as well, because I won't be bogged down by a 9 to 5. So thanks so much everybody that supported me so far, really appreciate it. And as always, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.